What is your definition of courage? Some would say it's doing the things we're afraid to do. And while I agree with that definition, to me, courage is so much more. Courage is also having the ability to listen to life, to listen to what others have to say, and maybe even more importantly, listening to what our inner voice has to say. Well, today my guest shares his courageous journey from alcoholism and depression to wellness and self-discovery. And I think you're going to really get a lot of this out of this discussion. And before we get into a lot, I just want you to know that being a man today has never been more challenging. And so the pain for many of us is real. And it's a pain of loneliness and unworthiness. And it's masked by our anger and our resentment. And it's all because we are uncertain and are afraid to take that next step. So if you're tired and fed up with where your life is at, then I'm going to encourage you to start your hero's quest, where you can become more, accomplish more, and live more than ever before. Go to members.theawakenedman.net and start your quest today. With that, let's get on with today's episode.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life, many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Yet, the hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve him. It's time to align yourself for greatness. It's time to become a revolutionary man. Stay strong, my brother.
Welcome, everyone, to the Revolutionary Man podcast. I'm the founder of the Awakened Man movement and your host, Alan DeMonso. When was the last time you called upon courage to get you through a challenging time in life? And which voice was the courage battling with? Was it yours, or was it with others around you? There's never been a more poignant time in life where men are constantly faced with the challenge of determining who we are and what we stand for. And so it takes courage to go out on our hero's journey, pulling ourselves through the dark night of the soul and living with passion, purpose, and power. Well, today, my guest is the epitome of just that. Allow me to introduce him. Lou Andrews is a stay-at-home dad living across the lake from Seattle with his beautiful wife and 4 incredible children. Andrew's career first was in sales, and he spent over 15 years in the technology industry, working for startups, some successful, some not, and mid-sized companies, and then ultimately with IBM. He has a BA in economics from the University of Washington and certificates from Bellevue College in both software development, database management. And these days, he finds his favorite things to do are spending time with his family, exercising, listening to music, live music that is, and going on road trips. Welcome to the show, Blue. How are things today, my friend?
Howdy. Thank you so much for having me. Things are good. Appreciate it.
Yeah, right on. It was really excited when we started to collaborate on getting you, having you be a guest on the show, and you have such an incredible story. And so, as you know, if you're familiar with listening to this show, the first question I ask all my guests is really talk about a part of your hero's quest. And so tell us about that time in your life when you knew things had to change. What did you do about that? And how did that experience shape you into the man you are today?
Yeah, thank you. That's a big question. I did. There's a point. There was a day. There was a moment that in August of 2010, that was the point. The point in my life when I knew that I needed to make a change. I spent my teens and into my 20s suffering through some traumas. I had a father that took off on us quite a bit and then finally left for good in the middle of the night. Came back, but then was never really there. And so my mom was raising my brother and me. And then when I was 17, she died suddenly of breast cancer. And that was that was 2 months following one of my close friends who I idolized had died in a freak accident. A few years later, I had another friend pass away at the age of 24 quickly from cancer, and then another woman who had become sort of a second mom to me. She passed away very quickly from cancer and some complications from that. All during that time, I was sort of estranged with my father. And so I had that trauma going on. around during that entire period when those things were happening, I also learned that I was a pretty good drinker. I was a pretty good partier. Um, and in my 20s, that was fun. But as I hit my 30s and grieving continued from those losses that took place in my 20s, and then the level of alcohol that I was drinking grew and became more and more a part of my life. By the time I was in my mid 30s, I had really started to feel depression, um, sadness, anger, regret, so many negative factors. And it really took hold by my late 30s when the depression had manifested itself physically, to where it was affecting me daily and my energy level, getting out of bed, those things. What's interesting, one of the biggest things that I struggled with was while I was going down that path, I almost had this parallel path. There was just this amazing life. My career was going great. I was making enough money. I I got lucky and found this woman that decided to marry me, who's just amazing. I had a couple of kids that were healthy and beautiful, and I had more friends, than a guy probably deserves. And so I was going down these two parallel paths, and I almost couldn't reconcile them. And so what happened is kind of the dark side, the dark path took over. And what happened when I was drinking was either it stopped being partying and it started leading towards either sorrow or anger. Finally, just after my 41st birthday, the depression had taken over. The beauty in my life I couldn't see anymore, and I tried to take my life. It was August of 2010, and so that was the turning point. That was when I knew that I needed to reevaluate, in my mind, what I thought I had to reevaluate everything about my life, who I was, what I wanted to do, what I liked, what I didn't like. And so I began the journey of recovering from alcoholism and recovering from depression at the same time. And what worked for me was, instead of focusing on the negative, instead of focusing on not drinking, not being depressed, getting through loss and grieving, what worked for me was looking towards wellness, looking towards health, physical health, mental health, emotional health. And so I really started to try and focus on what are the things that I wanted to do? Who did I want to be? Where did I want to go? And writing became a big part of that. I had this, I was a newspaper guy in junior high and high school. And so I think I had this writing passion inside of me that went away when I got into business. But I found that again. And I realized that, I love writing. Maybe I can write about what I went through, what I'm going through, and maybe that will translate to helping somebody else out. And so then that's really where I'm at today. I wrote a memoir, about my struggles and my successes after my suicide attempt. And I'm going to continue writing as my way of not only working through my thoughts, but maybe sharing and connecting with other people. So that's where I'm at today.
Man, Blue, that's just such a powerful story, and I just wanted to acknowledge that I hear you, and I see you, and I honor your presence today for sharing this time with us, because it's so important for men to hear that all of us struggle through life. And we're going to get into your memoir, the choosing life, and how you made that choice, because there's many of us that choose not to have that as a decision, as As to some of the latest stats are showing that, men are 4 times more likely to commit suicide than women. And I think we make choices based on some things that we don't know how to deal with. And so while that was a real heavy piece, I just thought I'd ask you the other side of that question, and something a little bit more uplifting for you. What's alive and real for you today?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I do. Like I said, one of the things that I talk about with anybody who will listen is this idea that let's go towards something, let's do something, let's don't something, let's not run from something, let's travel to something. And so, yeah, I like to talk about wellness and holistic health, and what that feels like, is a glimmer of hope. I think it's important, like you said, for people to recognize, hey, people struggle, but people do get through it. And no matter how far down the dark path you were, or you think you might be going, we can get out of it. And so for me, it might sound trite, but it really comes down to, for me, living in the moment and being present and recognizing that just the goodness that exists around us. My family, I've got 4 amazing kids. My wife, I live in just a beautiful part of the world, in the Puget Sound area around Seattle. My health, I don't take that for granted at all. I work on that all the time. It's tied for my number one priority, along with supporting my family. And so it's doing the things that progress my recovery. And I say recovery, to me, that's a positive word. Some people might think of it as, oh man, I'm recovering from this thing and I got to get through it so I can get to the next thing. To me, recovery is an opportunity to look at life in a different lens than maybe somebody who didn't struggle, or who didn't go through trauma, or who didn't make that decision that, hey, I'm going to improve, I'm going to change, I'm going to grow. And so recovery to me is a positive thing. So I think about those things that help me in recovery, and it's not only doing things for myself, but then when you're in a place of feeling good, well-being, then you can try and relate that to others, and maybe be a shoulder for them to lean on, or be an ear for them to listen. That's a big part of my life these days, is just listening to people tell their story. And when there's an opportunity, I can share little bits of mine, but for the most part, let them talk and try and understand what they're going through. So
Yeah,
that's a
really,
big part
that
of it.
absolutely, that listening piece. And we were talking about that as we were getting back and forth about coming together today. And it's really important that, as men, we learn to do that, because we're so quick to jump into fix mode, to
Yeah.
jump into to do something about it, right? And you talked about in your journey about recognizing that instead of focusing on not doing something, you wanted to focus on being something,
Yep.
something different, and that takes focus. And you also talked about really not taking life for granted, and that to me is that what epitomizes about being in the moment, is when you can recognize and that every morning when we wake up, how grateful are we? And it's taken me a long time, man, I tell you,
Yeah.
that to just take a lot of stuff for granted. And I think it was yesterday. Yeah, I think it was yesterday on my way into work, and away from the home here, and I called my wife and I just said, I just wanted to tell you that I just you're still on my mind, and how grateful I am that every morning I get to wake up and roll over, and you're still here. And I think we just take those simple things, for granted, because in today's day and age, I don't think anything's forever anymore, and it takes work. It takes work to heal ourselves. It's work that we're going to get into with what you have done, but not just healing yourself, but the healing through the family as well, and that
Yeah.
work that you had to do.
Yeah. I think that's, I think that's something that, when you've gone through struggles and those internal struggles then become external and affect other people and people that you love. That's hard. That's hard. And I think that to me takes some work on a regular basis to not regret that, to not let that become a burden. Um, Never forget, I think there's a balance because don't forget where you were because that perhaps might, be the motivation you need to not go back. But don't let it overwhelm you, but acknowledge the fact that maybe, you could have hurt somebody and the fact that they're still there with you, like you said, wow. We're pretty lucky. We're pretty lucky to have those people in our lives that have been watched us through our entire journey, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. Absolutely. Getting into your book there, you're right in the preface there that but we have to have this need to see for talking and sharing problems, like you were saying about listening to other people's problems. But since your book Choosing Life came out, how have the conversation been about it been going? What are people finding out about this book?
Yeah, so it's been interesting. I feel so fortunate to be in this position where I was able to put that out there and then have other people come back and say, "Hey, I read your book and it meant something to me. It moved me, and maybe it moved me to take action." And initially, I wanted to jump in and talk about a book, like what chapter did you read, or was there a passage that meant a lot to you? And then I realized that wasn't really my place. I told my story, they read my story. My place now was to listen and sit back, and because no story is going to be exactly the same. We may share some emotions, we may share one thing or maybe a couple, but no stories are the same. And so it took me a couple of months after the book was out to realize that, hey, I'm really here now to listen. And that is part of my current growth is being able to listen and what are people really saying, because men, and I think stereotypically men or men in general, or maybe it's just inherent to men, we don't share. We don't want to talk about our feelings. We'll sit next to each other and watch a game and may not say 20 words to each other. But I think it's important to not all the time be sharing your emotions, but you need to have a couple people that you can talk about things with. And if I can be that for somebody, that's just a great place to be. But if I can set an example by putting my book out there, and I've had a couple of guys say to me, well, I thought if you could do it, maybe I could do it too. Mm. And so we can lead by example. And then once you're in that position, then you can just really be a sounding board. What are they going through? Maybe they're in an early stage that you already went through and you can relate to that. Or maybe you don't need to say anything and all they needed to do was get it off their chest because they didn't feel like they could talk with somebody about it. So it's really an interesting place that I found myself in since my book came out. And then, when somebody else shares their stories, it's a reminder that I need to continue to share mine. Yeah. Because I'm not through this, right? I mean, life still has struggles. And so there's some give and take in there that I think that we, and again, men, I think especially, can grow towards or maybe strive towards, maybe.
Yeah, I completely agree. I started doing men's work, just through some of the personal challenges that I had, and I had been married to my high school sweetheart almost 30 years ago. And then that blew up, and, I lost everything, and then get married to my current wife and just about blew that one up. And thankfully, she gave me opportunity to do some work. And it was in that same time frame of that I lost my father-in-law. He was really, really close to me. And there was just nowhere to go. And to your point, right, as guys, we tend to struggle to speak up and share what's in us, because we have, in my experience anyways, I think we feel embarrassed to do that. We're not sure how to do that. Do we want to be we don't want to be that blubbering fool, in a support group of some sort. And because you're probably the only guy in there, number one. Right. And
Right.
and you're
Right.
sitting there and you have this stuff to get out. And, as I was saying in the intro about our hero's journey, my experience also shows that a lot of the hurt that we feel shows up as anger and resentment. So we don't know how to express it. And I think when we talk with, I talk with guests like yourself who've gone through this, your hero's journey on this planet, and now being able to come through the other side to help guide us men who are in a place that you were, and even if it is just being that sounding board, that listening, that holding space or creating space so they can share and feel like there's no shame and judgment in what's happening. And I think we need more of that. We need more guys such as yourself writing books, more podcasts, more everything for men. And I think the time is right today for this stuff to happen.
Yeah, I think, you jogged my thought there. I think there's a lot of times I hear guys say, I don't want to be a burden.
Yeah.
And so I think if someone out there is listening and thinking the same thing, I think they don't realize how much, when they share what's going on with them, it helps the person on the other end as well. Either inspires them to change or makes them feel better about the fact that they could be on the listening end to somebody. So I get bummed when I hear somebody say, I don't want to be a burden, because I don't think they realize they're not only helping themselves, they're helping whoever else is listening, whether it's a group of people, two people, one other person. And I wish that was recognized more out there in men's communities. So
Yeah, I completely agree. And thank you so much for saying that, because I've caught myself saying that to my wife about, don't want to be a burden, when something as simple as, hey, did I do my annual physical, and there's something that comes up that maybe I don't want to share. And, it's simple for us to go that way. But I had made a note here about, I remember there was a gentleman I spoke to, and he was talking about mentors, and we need three mentors in our life. And we need a mentor to mentor us, to help us get to where we are. And that's the work, through your book and the work that we're doing here. Then we need people on the same path. So we mentor each other.
mm-hmm.
And then the third mentor is that person that we need to be the mentor to. And that's that part about, I think what we're really talking about today is that sharing and not being a burden. Because when we do lean into it and share our experience, we may not be unconsciously not realize that we're mentoring this other person who is in need to hear this.
Right.
And until we decide to drop the veil of shame and that it's okay, then we can really start healing more than just ourselves, but families and communities.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I wrote that down too. That's great. Those three mentors. That's cool.
Speaking, I'm sure I'm sure there's been lots of questions through your journey. And so as I was thinking about this, what was the most powerful question that you've ever been asked?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. The most powerful question that I've been asked, gosh. I think there's some broad questions in around how, like a big one, because alcohol plays such a big role with men. and in society in general. Um, I think, and a lot of people that go through depression or struggling with grieving, or I guess a lack of direction, alcohol can get in the way of a lot of that. And so, how did you stop drinking? So, I don't know. We haven't talked about that yet. So, I have alcoholism. Um, we think my dad did. I think his dad did. Um, and I recognized pretty early on, before age 21, uh, that I had some alcoholism just by the way that I reacted to alcohol. Um, and so part of me healing was stopping drinking, and it's gone great, and I love it, and I'm so thankful for it. My life is so much better without it. Um, but it's hard. It's hard. That's a hard thing to do. And I was a sales guy in business, and that's a big part of that culture. And so I think I think when people ask me how did I stop, or how did I make that decision, or how did I change my life, or some form of that type of question, it's powerful for two things. One, it's it's a reminder that I made it. I made it through. Those first couple of years are tough.
Yeah.
And so it's like it's a little pat on the back. But then it's also a reminder of how big a deal it is, and I'm so inspired when I see guys going through that struggle, and maybe they slip up, and then they don't drink for 6 months, and then they slip up, and then it's a year, and I get motivated from that, because I know that it's not easy at all. And so I think there's power in that question, because at the very least they recognize they have a problem, or may have a problem, and they need to do something about it. And to me, that's so huge in life, that we can say, hey, there's something's wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe something that worked when I was 25 doesn't work when I'm 45, and I need to make a change. And so that question could be phrased around many different topics, but to me it comes as, how did you stop drinking? How do you continue to not drink?
Right.
And so those are great conversations. But yeah, that's a really good question. I may revisit that one. That's a good one.
Yeah, it spurred my I thought I'd ask that because I was checking out your website, creedsliving.com,
Yeah.
and on there you ask questions about, you're asking us what are our creeds, and I thought,
Yeah.
wow, what a great question. And so I'm going to ask, so I want to ask you, why is it important for us to ask ourselves that? And maybe if you could share some of your creeds that you're living by.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So creeds. So, I as I as I researched, we'll just say the big question, how to get better, because I was sick. If you get to the point where you think that life is not worth living anymore, the something's gone wrong, and you need to heal. You need band-aids and casts, and you need therapy, and so, how do I get better? And all different philosophies and ways of going about it. But I always kept hearing about people going down a plan, having a plan, or going down a path for 90 days or 6 months, and then it not working anymore. Or gosh, I was working with a therapist, or I was on an exercise plan, and it lasted for a year, and then I let that go, and now my back hurts again, or now I'm anxious again, and I have anxiety. And so why are we have all these great plans, but we're not following through with them, and they're not taking hold and lasting a lifetime? And it kept coming back to, maybe we don't understand why we are going through this struggle, because it's hard to make change, whether it's a change in your diet, a change in your attitude, a change in your daily routine. And as the older we get, the harder it becomes. And so if we don't understand why we're doing something, it's going to make it really hard to keep at it for more than 90 days or 6 months. If we're doing it just because a friend did it, or because Oprah said we should do it, or we read it on the cover of a magazine, that's not going to stick. So part of what Creed's living is spending time reflecting and really understanding the why of what we're doing. Because if we are going to stop drinking, if we are going to try and work through a grieving process that maybe was latent 15 or 20 years ago, if we're going to work through regret, or if we're going to try and lose 40 pounds or drop our cholesterol level, whatever it might be, it's going to take work. So we can't just do that because we think it might be good, or we need to really understand why. And so that's really what creeds are about. It's your set of beliefs and values, and it's your personal mission statement. And so to me, that's the first part of Creed's living, is recognizing that. And for me, I've got some tangible, simple ones. My family, I've got 4 kids and my wife. And those are reasons. And I'm an old guy with young kids. I'd like to live a long time so I can spend time with them and be there for them when they're adults. And I'm so thankful for my wife. And so I'd like to be there for her. And so my health is an important part of that, so that I can support them. So those are some tangible things. But my creeds aren't really one of the great things about creeds is that we can frame them in whatever manner we like. Maybe it's a page-long manifesto. Mine tend to be little bullet points. And so I think about, like, 2 of my big ones are patience and efficiency. And so to have patience with myself and patience with the world around me, so that I can hear what's going on in the world around me. I can appreciate what's going on in the world around me. I can have gratitude, and I can slow down. And so having some patience is important to me. And then having efficiency. I've had sort of a type A personality in the past. I try and temper that, but I like to set goals. I think it's important to be looking forward to something, as I said. And so being able to get through my day without a lot of hiccups, it is important to me. So being able to accomplish things. And so efficiency is sort of that, just a single bullet point that encompasses all of that. So those are the types of things that fall into place when I think of my creeds. Gratitude is a huge part of that, and I think that's a result of some level of mindfulness. So being mindful of what I'm doing, what others are doing, nature, and so those are when I have this, my creeds are almost a cloud with these little words in them, is how I picture my creeds. You would think, as somebody who has written a book, I would have this beautiful manifesto, but my creeds are sort of this sort of thought cloud that's outside of my head. So those are some things that fall into my values and things that I'm working on right now for myself.
I love that. And hearing you have, creeds for patience and efficiency and, and gratitude, it just, what it does for us, when we do that, we call them virtues here, and we practice a virtue a month. And so this month we're practicing the virtue of authenticity. And,
Oh yeah.
and the way I ask the guys to do it is to, when you're in a conversation with somebody that you don't agree with, how you respond. Are you responding authentically, or are you cringing? Are you worried about what you're saying? And so how can you be authentic, true, say what's truly in your heart, still leaving that individual in a good spot, especially
Yeah.
if it's a challenging conversation, but you've been able to be authentic. And so I like how you're framing this and having it be a way of living to help guide your direction and guide the direction for everything that you do. And I think it's so cool that that you've got these creeds, and I think it's important that we as men, for sure, that we use these things like this to just as guideposts to get us through that next piece. It helps us make decisions, right?
Yeah.
Is this in alignment with being patient today?
Right. Right.
When your kids are out of line.
Well, it's, the authenticity is so good. And I think that part of what I had to go through in getting from a place of depression to a place of wellness is 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 getting some self-esteem. So I talk about that in my book, and in fact, there's a couple of chapters of it in my book. When I was younger, I had self-confidence, and that was based on things that were external to me. Um, it was how well was I doing, on the field of play, or how well was I doing in business, measured by points or money. But it was all external. And after my attempt and as part of my recovery, I realized that I didn't. Well, it looked like this. I was this self-confident guy. It was all external, and I didn't really believe in myself, just me, like with nothing, like just blue. And so and that took a long time, first of all, for me to realize that, gosh, I don't have self-esteem. And then once I accepted that, which was a tough pill to swallow, then I had to say, well, then how am I going to find it? What is it?
Yeah.
And how am I going to get there? And so that was a huge part of my recovery. Once I became comfortable with who I was, nothing externally, no accolades, forget material things. Once I became okay with who I was,
Mm.
I realized I had self-esteem. And then I feel like I can be more authentic because I believe in who I am. And I'm also maybe not as judgmental because I'm, again, comfortable with me internally, and I don't really have to think about and judge other things and other actions and other people. And so I think that finding self-esteem is an important part of authenticity. So I
Yeah.
love that virtue for sure.
Yeah, I love that. What I really appreciate about what you just said there is that difference between having self-confidence and how you explain that makes complete sense to me. Our self-confidence, how often is it driven by external pieces versus inside? But self-esteem is really an inside job.
Yeah.
And I really like how you've made that distinction. And I think as we get older, we get to transition and have that deeper understanding and
Mhm.
appreciation. So thank you so much for how you frame that. I really like that. I took some great notes on it. What do you have any long-term goals for your personal growth? Like, you've written the book, I'm sure it's changed you immensely, let alone just living the life you have. But then you wrote this book and the change you went through that. But do you have any long-term goals for your personal growth at this stage?
Yeah, I want to keep learning. I want to keep learning about all sorts of different topics, but wellness and holistic health is, it's a big part of my life. Parenting, relationships, I want to continue to learn. I think, to me, there's this place of where I'd really like to get in terms of my wellness and personal growth is getting to a place where I can really listen to myself, listen to my intuition maybe, or a sixth sense, so that I can get to a point where I'm um, reacting to the world in an optimal way, um, and moving forward with, again, confidence in myself, my self-esteem, and who I am and what I'm doing. Because I think for a lot of my life, I was so burdened by grief, depression, um, this concept, the alcoholism, and beyond the alcoholism, this concept that I had to be, that partying was such a big part of my life, and letting that go, that um, I got to a point where I wasn't making rational decisions. I wasn't seeing reality. I wasn't seeing the beauty in life. I could no longer see that because this depression and alcoholism had sort of tainted my vision. So I think I've done a good job up until now, the last 10 years of growing myself to a place where I can see the world as it is, which I believe the world's beautiful. And I think when we have a level of well-being, we see that. But continuing to really see the world um, in an optimistic way, um, and then being able to listen to myself the best way possible. I think that's where I'd like to go. Um, the little day-to-day things, I I'm working on another book, which will be more of a traditional self-help, self-improvement, personal growth book than Choosing Life, which is a memoir. Um, I would like to expand on my website, creedsliving.com. And I'd like to get involved in more, organizations like yours, and do more podcasts and those sorts of things. So, um, just through my writing, I think more than anything, being able to just offer a voice and say, hey, raise my hand. Um, hey, I've been there. Um, I've made it through, and maybe you want to think about whether or not you can too. So that's more practical um, goal for myself.
Right on, brother. Just love that. Listen, what's been the best piece of advice that you've ever been given? And when you think about that piece of advice, how has it served you? How has it served you, and does it still serve you today?
The best piece of advice that I've been given, gosh, you know, I was part of a men's group that met on a weekly basis. We'd meet for about 90 minutes on Thursday nights, and there was about 10 of us that were, part of the group at any one time. Guys would float in and out. Um, Sometimes there'd be two or three people that would show up to this group. Sometimes 12 would show up. Um, and I think I heard it there first. And then I worked with a writing coach for a little while, um, that helped me, transition my writing from sort of journaling to something that could be part of a book. But um, I think it's around the idea that, we can't tell other people what to do. We can only tell our own stories, and lead our own lives by example, and hope that maybe that would connect with somebody else, and they would be able to make their own decisions. So the piece of advice really is something around, um, you can only, do what you do, and you have to let other people, take from that on their own, through their own experiences, their own lens. um, so it's, that's not, I don't have a beautiful quote for you, but something around that.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It's outstanding.
Yeah.
I know, Blue, of everything that we talked about today, and maybe there was something we didn't get a chance to touch on, what would be the one takeaway you would like our listeners to have?
Well, so, my perspective and the world that, that I'm in with choosing life and coming out of alcoholism and depression is, life is good. Um, and, you may not see it now, but, if you work and really reflect and have a goal of finding well-being, that you can see that life is good. And just as someone who's been at the lowest depths that you can be, I understand when things look dark, but I don't think that's real life. And as you find wellness, I think you'll see that life is good as well.
Man, love that. What a way to sum everything up. Just want to say once again, thank you, my friend, for spending time with me today. And I think you've shed a lot of light on the power of us choosing life, and living through courage, because you've been very courageous in sharing everything you did today. If men are interested in getting a hold of you and participating in your book, in your work, and buying your book, what would be the best way for them to reach you?
So Creed's Living, CREEDS Living, creedsliving.com. You can reach me via email. And then there's information on my book, Choosing Life, there, and my upcoming book will be there as well. But I'm going to try and keep all of my writing and updates at creedsliving.com. So
Perfect. I'll make sure that's information is in the show notes so folks can get out and get a hold of you. You're doing some outstanding work there, Blue. Thank you so much again,
Thank
brother,
you.
for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Revolutionary Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is The Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.